I'm here with the absolutely fantastic Frank Gilfeather. Hello, Frank. How are you?
Nice to see you, Rachel.
Lovely to see you again, and great to sit down with you today. So I'm going to sort of jump straight into conversation because there's loads of things I want to talk to you about today. Starting with the fact that you've had this amazing, rich, in-depth, wide-ranging career that's now led you back to basically where you started, because you started as an amateur boxer and now you're back teaching and promoting boxing on social media with lots of sports in the middle. There was a book in the middle. There's arts in the middle. So I guess I'd like to talk to you about your experience of going through all of these years, the different areas of your career and things that you've noticed has really changed, because obviously we've now got social media in boxing. We've got more screens, like different, what's the word? It's not just on one channel, there's multitude
Yeah,
of channels. It's
yeah.
across the world. It's everywhere. So yeah, just what this experience has been like for you, what you have noticed the most, and all of that.
Well, things have moved very quickly in the last two and a half years in terms of social media because this was just a bit of a lark in the gym one day when my son Paul said, "Show me how to throw an uppercut," and it was on a wall-mounted bag. It's a new contraption for me, and so I did that, and he put it on TikTok, and it went viral. And TikTok began to grow and grow. And the more we did in this, he was doing it for fun. It was really fun for him. But before I got to that, of course, I had this career as an amateur boxer, which started at the age of 4. And I had my first, what they call today, a skills contest. It's an exhibition, we called them, at the age of 7. And then I kind of boxed as a youth right way through to senior level. And boxed for Scotland, roughly 200 contests all over Europe and throughout the UK, twice in the Royal Albert Hall against England. So that was the focus for me growing up when I realized, although nobody told you in those days, but you just realized that you were good at this. So you got on with it, and I tried to improve and so on. And it worked, right? But by the time I was 21, I was fed up of it because I'm training 5 days a week. I'm traveling a lot. I'm sparring with professionals going through from Dundee, which is where I'm from, um, to Glasgow and other places to spar with top professionals when I'm 15 and 16. So I'm gaining all this experience. Anyway, at 21, that was put to one side. Done that. And I was training to be a reporter, a newspaper reporter. I started on a weekly paper in a town called Arbroath, which is near Dundee, and I learned the ropes there for a couple of years and then joined a regional paper here in Aberdeen and then into TV and radio over a period and freelancing over a period of, I don't know, three and a half. Well, tell a lie, 56 years as a journalist.
Wow.
So so that was fine. I quit only a couple of years ago because I thought, well, I think I need a rest from this game. Although I didn't find it too taxing, but I quit. And then along comes, as I explained at the start, along comes the social media stuff. And that just grew like wildfire. And it's become so exciting and actually so kind of reinvigorating for me, particularly because of the comments that I received, mainly on Instagram, which are extremely complimentary and encouraging, but also they tell me that I inspire people to get off their backside and get out there and do something in terms of exercise. So I've got the boxing tuition, which I've got on YouTube as well, Frank's Noble Art, and that's important. But in the Instagram one, it's a mix. It's about talking about big fights coming up. It's about analysing the big fights that have gone, but also telling people that their life should not be spent in front of a TV screen or a computer eating the wrong kind of food. So there's that aspect to it as well. And that's the bit that pleases me as much as the boxing, because people are saying, I haven't done anything for years, decades, and yet watching what you do and listening to your message never give up on yourself. I'm now going out and I'm walking or I'm jogging. I enjoy the gym. So that means more than anything to me. Kind of ordinary people, non-athletic people, non-sportsmen who are now seeing the value of keeping fit through exercise.
It's fantastic. I love the story. I think there's a couple of points I want to tie into there. I'm going to work backwards. So I think what I think is gets misconstrued, and I think unfortunately social media can be a part of this, is people think you have to be an athlete to do something athletic. And what they forget is that everybody started somewhere. And actually, just by walking, by jogging, by movement in general, you don't have to
Yeah.
become an athlete one day. You don't have to have the best physique in the world. You should think about how it makes you feel, and then your cardiovascular health. And what you're doing is you're taking away excuses. And I
Well, I
feel,
hope so.
yeah, definitely, because you're taking the status quo and you're changing it because you're saying, I used to box
Yeah.
and I've now rekindled my love for the movement of boxing. It's not about going and fighting again.
Yeah.
And I'm, what are you, 79, I think? Am I
Yes.
correct? Yeah, 79. And that says to people who might be like, oh, I'm too old, or I'm too this, or I'm too that, or I'm too tired, that actually we are what we say we are. So to say, actually, you don't have to stand still. Secondly, I wanted to go back to your comments about your amateur career. Do you think that the athletes are at risk of like sort of training burnout, sport burnout? Do you think that's why sometimes we lose people, you know, whether it's from an amateur level where they just stop, or at a pro level where you can witness where their performance, which might have been elite and it might have got them into some of these bigger fights, and then they kind of just start to slow, or they seem their energy feels like it doesn't want to be there. Do you think that this is a kind of an issue, a risk, a situation? Does it depend on the person mentality? What do you think it all is?
Well, I think you've hit on an interesting point, and I've made this point to people I know in the boxing game who work extremely hard, extraordinarily hard in terms of their fitness. And the thing I say to them, and the phrase we always used to use was, "Be careful you don't become stale." Now, and people say, "What does that mean, stale?" And it's a psychological thing. You could be the fittest guy on the planet. But if psychologically you become tired and weary and you're thinking, oh, do I now comes the problem. Oh, do I have to go to the gym today? Do I want to? Can I have a day off? So there's all that comes into it. And so if you're stale, then it does affect your performance, obviously, because you've got to be 100% focused on anything you're doing. And what you see is these guys who have gone through or are going through this kind of process, you see them in the gym and the effort isn't there. It's, they're subdued, they're kind of thinking, oh, I wish I was home. I can't wait to get this finished. So my advice when it reaches that point is take a couple of weeks off. You know, people are scared. Athletes are scared to take time off because they think they're going to lose out in some way in terms of their fitness. Their fitness will always be there. A couple of weeks is nothing. What you need to do is psychologically, mentally switch off, forget about it. I did it for decades. I switched off for decades. And I started going back to the gym in my probably late 40s, early 50s. And then I gave it a miss again. And then I was going back later. And I said to people, if I had given up, for example, in my 50s or when I was 50, I would have missed out on 3 decades of keeping fit and exercising. So I understand fully when people are thinking, oh no, I don't want to do this, I need a rest. Yeah, have a rest. Because if that's what you're thinking, then you need to have a break, but not from the physical aspect so much, more the mental aspect. So I don't say, oh, you work through it, or I don't believe in that. Take a break. Everybody deserves a break.
No, I fully agree. I think that I think we're moving, we have been moving, and we continue to move into a new era where the mental side of thing is considered more. It's not just something where you just suck it up, because actually the mental focus, the want to walk towards something where you're guaranteed physical pain needs to
Mhm.
take a real strength of mindset to be able to do. So if you are overtired, bored, had enough, feeling like a bit lost, that's the worst thing that you could send somebody into, because they're guaranteed to get hurt. It's hard
Yeah,
to find that drive.
yeah.
Do you think a fighter's mindset is something that's born? So is it nature? Or do you think it's something that can be nurtured? Do you think that even if you have a kid or a teen who is maybe softer of nature, do you think they can be nurtured into a fighter's mindset through will and strength and practice?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought of that before. Um, but off the top of my head, I think probably it needs to be there in the first place. And it takes me back to my school days when we had people in the class who, for example, were um, unfit, overweight, or whatever. And they would go to PE lessons and be unable to do what other boys were doing and be able to, unable to vault over something or do the exercise, the calisthenics, and climb the rope and all that kind of stuff they used to do. And I would watch one teacher in particular who would bully these guys because they couldn't manage. You know, I think now we're more enlightened, and I think that these guys would have been more kind of protected, if that's a word, but they would have been not mollycoddled, but they would have been encouraged. And I think that's the big thing. You need to tell kids they're doing well, whether they're doing well or not, as long as the effort is there. If the effort isn't there, then, you know, you feel like saying to them, why are you wasting my time? I don't mind if you're useless. What I do mind is if you're not giving it your all. So I think that's the key thing. Now you recognize the ones who might be giving their all, but are just not very good, and the other ones who are not very good and not giving their all. These guys have got to be um, looked after. These kids, for example, that you can maybe try make it a bit easier for them. Give them something easier to do, but do not exclude them. So in the gym, in the boxing gym, it's very inclusive, but you can spot right away the lazy ones, the guys who cannot do it, but like to be there as part of the boxing gym, and that should be welcomed, and they should never be turned away. So I think you can tell instantly, certainly in the boxing gym, if somebody has the will. Now, whether he's going to be any good or not is another issue. But if they have the will and the wherewithal to work hard, then that for me is more important, certainly in the early stages of their career in boxing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely something that you can spot. As you and I have discussed before, I am a boxing coach, so I'm around that, and I observe those different personalities. I observe the different people that show up. I think also the thing that I notice is the different energies in different gyms. So you have some gyms that are just warm, welcoming, they challenge and push and want everybody to have the opportunity to grow, but they give them a space, without hurting, without threatening, without bullying, without belittling. And then you go into spaces where it's a lot more unmonitored, or people have a lot of ego, or their ego is very fragile, so they like to pick on the smaller guy to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that in your own amateur sort of times and things that you've witnessed, and now that you're in gyms and now you're in back going through, do you notice these things? Like, you encourage this as a very universal thing, and I feel like that should definitely be the narrative. What do you think? Is there anything that we can do to stop those things, or is it just a gradual change, or is it something that will never change?
I don't think we'll ever change it, other than education. And some coaches, I guess, will never be able to change. If they're hard-bitten coaches and they're shouters, I don't like shouters. If they're shouters and they are perhaps belittling boxers in front of others, then that should be discouraged, obviously. But I think what we're looking at gyms in generally, in terms of amateur boxing gyms, we're looking at, as you mentioned earlier, they're welcoming places. They're places where people will feel that they're very instantly, part of that scene, and they'll join the club and they'll feel great. Now, I tell a story about a kid I used to spar with when he was 12, and they would all line up and sit on a bench ready to come in with me, and I would take them one at a time at the end of a session, and we would spar. But this kid, he was overweight, and he was a bit of an outcast, as it were, where the others were kind of more athletic. And I said next, and we'd come in, we'd have this little spar where I would let them pretend they're hitting me, and so till the end, and I said to this guy, are you coming in? Now he waited, he skipped his turn in the queue every night so that he would be last. And I never understood why. Well, I did actually after the first time, because when he came in, all the others had gone to the changing room because that was the finish of the session. And he didn't want them around to mock him or, make a fool of him. So he would come in. And he wasn't any good, but didn't matter. He was there. And I started to do on the first spar, I started to do a little commentary, a boxing commentary. And I forget his name, John or something. And I said, this is John trying for the title here in Aberdeen. And he's up against the star performer, Frank Gilfeather. Can he do it tonight? All that stuff. And so he was throwing punches. Of course, I'm catching them on the glove or on the elbows. And I go, oh my goodness, what a punch that was from John Smith. He's wonderful. You know what? I could see this guy growing in front of me. So spin on to the next night, and we're all doing the same. He waits to the end, in he comes, and I'm just sparring away. And after about 10 seconds, he stopped. He said, can you do your commentary, please? And I said, yeah, sure. That made him feel on top of the world. And he left that club with his chest out and his head held high. Now, 5 years later, I'm coming out of Aberdeen Football Club Stadium in the middle of the week after a press conference when this guy, tall, slim, but 17 years of age, hand in hand with a girl, is walking towards me. He was going to be passing me. And when we got level, he spoke. He said, Frank, do you not recognize me? And I looked and I said, I'm sorry, I don't. He said, I'm so-and-so, used to spar with you. And I said, oh, yeah, of course. Oh, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. We exchanged some pleasantries. And he said, yeah, I'm boxing for Scotland now. And I said, no,
Wow.
really? And that was what I thought. But then my second thought, which came soon after, was, no, you're not. And he looked and he said, so yeah, I've boxed for Scotland 3 or 4 times. And when the girl wasn't looking, he gave me a wink.
Okay.
And this was for me to latch onto his little white lie that he told his girlfriend, I box for Scotland, you see. So that would have impressed him. So I went along with the whole thing, and he went. But there you are, that little incident in the boxing club, which happened again and again and again with the sparring and the commentary, that gave him the confidence that he never had before. So, it's swings and roundabouts. I think you can't treat everybody the same. It's like a man management thing if you're a football manager. Everybody's got to have, because of their different characters and personalities, they've got to be treated differently. However, where they're not treated differently is when they refuse to put in the effort.
I agree. And I think there's only so far that you can carry somebody else. Um,
Yeah,
I actually had it with a fighter recently. He'd been going through a lot of stuff in his personal life, and a fight was coming up, and the opponent that he had was a good one. It was a good matchup on a good day, and he was not going through a good
yeah,
day. And I spoke with the assistant coach, and I just said, this has to be his decision to decide if he can pull himself out of this space to give everything he
yeah,
needs to for this camp, because actually we can't carry that weight. That's not ours to carry, and actually that's that's the thing about boxing is you are in there alone. Although you have a team, you
Yes,
have a coach, you have trainers, you have managers, you have, whatever level you're at, you have people around you, but it is you and only you in that space, which can make it, you know, a very interesting journey for those on the fight journey. Um,
yes.
and then those not on the fight journey, it can just be a really amazing up level and sense of self, which I think you promote very well on your social media, talking about the fact that you can do it anywhere. What's your tagline? Anywhere under the stars.
It's anywhere under the sky.
Anywhere under the sky. Yeah, beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that, and it's true because you can move anywhere, and you can move. You don't need money. You don't need a gym. There is always a place that you can go and be, and that develops a sense of self, which develops liking yourself more. Just from a basic level, you like being who you are because you're showing up in a different way. You're being disciplined, and you get the endorphins, etc., etc. Speaking of your social media, obviously we touched on it at the beginning. Sort of talk me through your experience now, because you will have been of an era. I mean, obviously, I was of an era where there was no social media. I mean, Facebook came around when I was like 18, but you were really of an era where there was no social media until sort of recent years. Like, what's your obviously you've had a very successful time of it, but what is your kind of overview, because you're using it for something good? What are your thoughts, because obviously you experienced sport in general without it, and now it's everywhere.
I know. And sometimes I'm still trying to deal with that, because my son Paul, who does all that stuff for me, and he'll explain something, and I have no idea what he's talking about in terms of social media. I can now upload stuff onto my YouTube page, but the other stuff Paul handles, the TikTok and Instagram. And the great thing from my point of view is that I get so many comments from young boxers saying, "Thank you for your lessons. I take my phone to the gym, place it on a shelf beside the punch bag where I work, and I replicate, or I try to replicate what you're doing, what you're showing me." So that's a breakthrough, And other people, I get lots of comments from coaches, social media coaches, and others who are actually in amateur boxing clubs saying, "Thanks for your knowledge. I just replicate what you're doing and what you're telling me, and I put it into use in my own gym." So that's great, because it does worry me that the experience that coaches need isn't there so much, because boxing clubs, generally speaking, I think, have allowed their retired boxers to leave the gym. I'm giving up boxing, okay. And when I think the question should be asked, would you like to stay on as a coach? And if we had more of that, now the coaching might not be brilliant, but what it does bring to a boxing club is an experience. How do you feel when you're in the ring? How does it feel when you get a punch in the face? All that stuff comes into play. And so when they're in the corner, they know what's going on. And you said an interesting thing earlier about, being on your own. Of course you're on your own. And that's what the great coaches do, all the work, of course, in the gym, right? And the teaching has got to be there. Custamato was a teacher. I am a teacher. I don't regard myself as a coach. In fact, I don't like that word. I'd rather be called a trainer, but that's me drifting back decades again. So those guys who are trainers and they're doing all the good work teaching in the gym, when they go into the corner, they know when that bell rings that they have no influence until the break between rounds. And that's when they have had to have spotted the flaws in both their boxer and the other boxer, so that when their boxer comes back, they can be. Now, there are different styles of being in the corner. I prefer the more kind of the calmer approach. I think if you get the boxer kind of wound up and excited, then that could be counterproductive. But I like the calm approach where you're saying, right, once you've settled in the first 5 seconds, you get the message over there. And the message has got to be uncomplicated and it's got to be short because the boxer won't retain lots of stuff that's going on. And in the pro game, of course, you're hearing two, three voices sometimes in the corner. And the boxer's saying, well, who do I listen to? And actually, the boxer isn't hearing any of it because his mind's on. He's maybe had a few thumps in the face. His mind's on that previous round. You've got to get that. That's gone. Forget that. So, as far as the trainers are concerned, do all the good work, but teach. Now, the thing I want to emphasize here is the lack of teaching of defense, as far as I can see. The number one rule is protect your chin, protect yourself. And so people have different styles. Now, I'm not going to criticize styles of boxers because not only do you have to find your own style, sometimes the style finds you. And the style is all about feeling comfortable. But if the style is wrong and that comfort zone that you established is wrong, the teacher, the coach, the trainer, call him what you will, he's got to try and eradicate these bad habits. But then he can only eradicate them if the boxer is willing to practice, as many times as it needs in order to perfect that new punch or the new maneuver or whatever it is. It's so important, and the trainers have an important job in the corner, especially when the guy comes back, maybe had a bad round, taking a couple of hits, and so you've got to reinstill in him that he's a better fighter, that he's confident. You've only got 3 rounds, remember, when you're in the amateurs. It's longer, it's better sometimes if it's longer because your guy can afford to lose a round or two, but you can't let it slip too much.
Definitely. I think that's really important. I mean, I came into the boxing game slightly later than most. I was 18 when I started to box. Was going to be trained up for the women's amateur championships, but I found out I had a heart condition. So I was in this strange, bizarre place in my life, which was, oh, I'm really good at this sport, but I'm not allowed to do it. And it was very
Yeah.
frustrating. So when I finally got in the ring in 2022, it was one of the best and happiest days of my life. I made a lot of bargains with God to make sure I could just do it once. I was like, just let me do it once, just once, let it happen. And it all, it was grand. I learned so much from that experience. But that's when I turned my hand to coaching because I was like, I'm clearly not supposed to be a fighter, but I can't be without this sport. It makes me so happy. So I became a coach. And one of the things that I think probably because I came in a little bit later, because my journey was a little bit messy, was to study the art from the ground up. Like I wanted to know everything there is to know, and I still continue to do so. I like to train under some of the best coaches. I like to listen to the best advice. I like to listen to lots and
Yeah.
lots of opinions. It doesn't mean I have to take them on as all fact, but it's just, I think it's good to
Sure.
hear what people are saying. But the thing that I definitely embody is that very traditional technical style of boxing that you only really get from people of your age range to maybe 20 years below. There's a kind of a chunk of time
Yeah.
which is pre-social media, right? So anything you learned, you had to learn in the boxing gym, you had to learn in the amateurs, you had to learn. And I find that that's the best place that I've learned, through those spaces. Now, that's not to say that other people and
Sure.
other places aren't good, because that's not true at all. There are younger coaches that have been absolutely outstanding and taught me so much. But my question was going to be, with all that waffle, was, do you feel that the teaching of that technical has been diluted somewhat through the years because we've now got more avenues where people can teach, but also you can go to things like box fit classes where nobody's had any technical boxing training, but people are being shown how to punch a bag with no correct sort of, no ability to teach fault correction to make sure they're hitting the bag properly or make sure their technique is correct. Do you think that has kind of diluted that quality of the technique, and why people are sort of flocking towards you because they're not able to find it as easily unless they go into an amateur gym, which might feel daunting?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think one of the things we've got to remember is that in the space of me quitting boxing and then going on my journalism career and so on, the changes have been astronomical. I think it worries me big style that most of the evidence seems to be as I look at amateur boxing is that they want to fight like professionals, many of the kids, right? And I think we must examine that area. And by that I mean it's all about aggression, attack. I want to knock his head off. I want to hurt him. I want to get in there. And what happens is the more energy and effort they put into their aggressive style of boxing, the more tired they become. Right. So what I would like to see more of is the thinking boxer, the boxer who goes in there without any inclination to knock somebody out. If you knock somebody out, generally speaking, it's a fluke. If you stop them inside the distance, in the amateurs, it tends to be the aggressive fighter who, gets in early, if you like, and goes on non-stop to try and beat his opponent into submission. And so there's learning from that aspect of it. Why do we need to go out from round one to, set the bar high in terms of aggression? I don't think we do. I think we need to see a bit more calm. I think we need to see the teaching of how to deal with an aggressive opponent. There are ways where you could just take the heat out of the situation and you can slow the pace of the bout to your level, to what you want. But of course, that all comes with experience. But the experience can't be gained without the teaching. So I've been in gyms all over the UK and I've shown things like grabbing the elbow if you're caught in the corner and turning the guy into the corner and turning the tables, and then you're now the aggressor, right? And I remember a couple of guys I did it to saying, when I did it, and go, oh, what happened there? I didn't see that coming. I had no idea you could do that. Yeah. And what about when you're hurt and you're against the ropes? What do? You just grab the guy and walk him into the center of the ring with your arms around his arms so that he can't hit you. Okay, the referee will say break and don't be holding. It doesn't matter. In that moment, you have now re-established where you want to be, which is the center of the ring. So all these kind of little tricks, people call them tricks. They're not. It's just common sense stuff. They're all designed to protect yourself. And even the simple thing, you go back, you look at videos of the greats like Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis and these guys. What do they have? They have the backhand open in front of the chin, maybe about 4 or 5 inches in front of the chin, and they take all the jabs here. And when there's a cross, they put it over, they take it here. And when there's a hook coming here, they take it here. So that's what I call the sliding door hand. And if you've got the sliding door hand, then what you're going to do is you're going to A, not take punches, B, frustrate your opponent. And frustrated opponent can then become an angry opponent and do silly things. And of course, that puts you in pole position. So I go back to what I said earlier. Defense is number one. I think I've made this analogy before, where if you are a football team, you cannot lose the game if you lose a goal. So if you take that premise into boxing, you can't lose if you're not taking punches. That's number one. And it puts you in a confident mood. This guy can't hit me because I've closed the door. If I leave it open, or worse, as I see, if I have my hand against my face and I think that's guarding my face, it's not. All it's going to do is the guy will hit you on the gloves and it will be painful. It will cushion it a bit, but it will be painful. So you get your hands off the face and you protect your chin more than any other part of the body.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant advice, and it's great. And it's like you say, it's such simple things, but actually they're the simple things that get missed.
Yeah.
Even things like footwork and angling for me was completely missed in the early parts of, people were trying to get me to fight so quickly that for a long time in my early years of boxing, I was very static because nobody showed me, because they were so quick, because I had a natural ability to pick up the punches and the combinations and everything, and I had a natural rhythm. but so much got lost that I had to go back again. Because for me personally, I don't like to jump stages. I like to know, but lots of people do like to jump stages because they get very excited. They see what's going on social media, and they see a lot of the kind of the flow states that you see, a lot of very cool combinations and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love a flow state. If I can get in and do a 26 shot combination, I'm a very happy bunny. But there's a time and a place for everything. And I think unfortunately some people see that and they see that as boxing, when that's just an element of boxing. I think I wanted to touch on the sort of the aggression side of things that you mentioned early on. Now, obviously, the amateurs is the earlier part of people's careers, and then if they do well and they want to, they can go into things like the Olympics, and then if they want to as well, they can go into the pros. Now, there are so many magical and wonderful things about the pros, and you and I have discussed this before. Do you feel that the way that people handle themselves in press conferences and things like that is actually part of the issue as to why people think that boxing is actually a very aggressive thing? Yes, it's a fight. Yes, it is a hurt sport, but actually there is a beautiful art that gets missed because of this kind of drama that ensues around the fight. Do you think that's actually part of part of the problem?
I think it is a part of the problem because what you're doing is for the public at large throughout the world, if you're misbehaving at a press conference or a weigh-in and you're engaging in nonsense and threats to your opponent and all the histrionics that we've seen over the past few years, with the Tyson Fury stuff and berating Alexander Usyk for 11 minutes in his face. Um, that's unpalatable for me. And I think probably for boxing people in general. Now, the promoters will say this is great, it sells tickets. Yeah, okay. I don't believe it sells tickets, by the way, but let's agree that it does sell tickets. But what does it do for the image of boxing to the outside world? It absolutely ruins it because why? If you're a parent, for example, why would you look at a press conference where people are upending tables, and we've seen stuff where um, guys have been physically assaulted after a press conference and a weigh-in, and all that stuff. That is such a bad look for professional boxing. And one of the things I like about Turki Al Sheikh in Saudi Arabia, who has reinvigorated professional boxing. He's come along and he's done something that hadn't been done for years and years, decades. He has given a new lease of life, and he's reinvented boxing, if you like. Now, my question to him in a video, if you like, was when I saw Daniel Dubois going in the ring after Usyk had beaten Fury, and shouting in his face that he wanted revenge for his defeat against Usyk. And I thought, hang on a second, this guy has just come through 12 grueling, punishing world championship rounds, and you're in his face within about 5 minutes of the final bell going. And I would like to see all that kind of stamped out. And I would like to see the hierarchy in boxing stepping in and say, okay, lads, because this wouldn't happen. This is WWE stuff. This is wrestling stuff. But as we know, wrestling is show business at that kind of level. It's not real wrestling. So they're behaving like the Incredible Hulk or whatever he's called, the wrestler. All these guys are in it as a circus. And the boxers coming in and think, well, that's a good way to do things. I'll do that and I'll get the attention. Now, we've seen it it's going on the most hyped fight I can ever remember, certainly in British boxing history. Conor Benn coming up against Chris Eubank Jr. Every time you put it on social media in the feed, it comes up. One's screaming at the other, one's calling the other something offensive and insulting. And I'm thinking, wow, is that? We get the message, but do we need to hear it 20, 30 times every time we put on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is? So we don't need that in boxing. In fact, it's derogatory, not only for the person on the receiving end. This is what I say. If Turki Al Sheikh can help stamp out that behaviour, he's gone a long way to invigorating professional boxing at the highest level. I would like him now to go and say, right, this kind of behaviour is unacceptable. I won't stand for it. If you want to box for me, you'll behave in my way. If you look at any of the weigh-ins from the great days of Sugar Ray Robinson, Joe Lewis, all these fabulous champions, they weighed in, they turned to each other, shook each other's hand and said good luck, and they walked away. None of this heads together like stags, in the rutting season when they're trying to out-head each other. So let's get rid of all that. It's bad for boxing. It's bad for the image, and it's bad if you're a parent and you had thoughts about sending your kid to a boxing gym. You would maybe have second thoughts and saying, do I really want them to be involved? I mean, it's rough and it's tough and it's degrading.
I completely agree, and I love that this is your mindset around it because I feel a little bit like my thoughts on the circus around the fight isn't always as kind of celebrated because the way that I view boxing is it's one of the purest and most honest things that you can do. You strip yourself away of any of your coping strategies. You put yourself through one of the most grueling processes to get ready to be in a fight. There's no other sport where you have to cut weight and dehydrate yourself to be at your best performance whilst not being able to, you know, do the things that you might do for comfort. Like people shut themselves away from their family and they don't even sleep maybe enough. And, there's so many things that strip you away. Then you go in the ring where you could die. Let's call a spade a spade. You have to be ready for every opportunity, every outcome, every whatever to even step through the ropes at the highest, if you talk about the highest level, particularly while everybody's watching you and you could fall down. That's one of the most raw and honest things. And it's one of the things I love the most about boxing in a world that isn't real, has become, so much less real. So when I see these fighters in the drama beforehand being, saying they're going to crack each other's skulls open or kicking off and stuff, I'm like, but you're lying, and you're lying in a sport where you're supposed to be honest, because I don't believe you, but you're downgrading yourself, and I feel like you're downgrading the sport and your opponent. Who actually would it really hurt to sit opposite somebody and just be like, I actually think you're amazing, and I'm lucky that I get to dance with you, because if I beat you, I feel proud of myself because I know you're sick, and I get to go and showcase to the world that I'm better than you. And I don't mean that in a way of like I'm better than you, but just in skill set. That's it's the dream to be able to beat the best in the world and become the best. And I think that's one of the things that I like so much about Usyk is that he is probably one of the quieter fighters who then has a great sense of humor and then goes and does the job. And I think that that's something that he is extremely commendable for. And I think,
Well,
oh, sorry.
sorry, I like Usyk for a couple of other reasons. One is he follows and he likes my stuff on
Yeah,
Instagram.
Usyk's the man. He's the
Yeah,
man.
but the other thing, I think this guy's got so much dignity, and
Definitely.
so you could see him in the face of these. We'll call them bullies because Dubois' actions in that ring and saying I want to fight you, and he's in his face, and Fury's action before the last fight, they were unacceptable. It was bullying behavior, but I love the way Usyk dealt with it. He just looks, he kind of has a half smile on his face, and he'll turn to his interpreter and say, "What is it? Why is this guy bothering me? What is?" And I love that. That's kind of dignity, old school boxing dignity that it's not gone. It's there in lots of boxers, but my worry is that year on year it's disappearing. So I love it that Usyk is setting this example. This is how it should be, and I would love it to continue along those lines, and for him to get that message over to the guys who like to tease and taunt their opponents, either outside or indeed inside the ring. And we've seen them as well. Ben Whitaker comes to mind. And I think, that kind of behavior is demeaning for his opponent. and others who act like that. I mean, it's very clever, and he's extremely talented. And like him before, people who were like that were Pernell Whitaker and a couple of others who behaved in that way and were extremely talented. But do you want to be remembered for that? Or do you want to be remembered because you're a brilliant world champion? I think we know the answer to that.
And I think also, if you want to look at ticket sales, B2BF and Bivol are quite similar to Usyk. They're very quiet, they're very respectful, they're very humble. You know, if they don't put on their best show, they say that guy won. It wasn't my best show, and they go away and they train harder. And they sell out shows. They don't have to do anything to prove. It's actually, I think it's an excuse that people have given themselves that we need the drama to sell the fight. Footballers don't need drama to sell football games because people go to the sport because they love the sport. People will come and watch
Yeah,
boxing to go and see good fights. And I do genuinely believe that boxing wouldn't die out if it got quieter in the terms
of course.
of that
And
situation.
what's the common denominator here? We've spoken about Usyk. Now we're talking about Bivol and Beterbiev, whose last fight I was at in Riyadh. What's the common denominator? They're all Eastern European.
Mm.
So that is a great, um, it's a great kind of example of how Eastern European boxers behave. And it's because their trainers would not allow them to behave any other way. Not that they would even dream of behaving the way some of the boxers behave these days in the Western world. So you've got these guys that are so disciplined, and the discipline is hammered into them from a young age when they're in the gym. I mean, I've boxed against Eastern Europeans in Bulgaria, and these guys know exactly what they have to do. It's all mapped out for them, and they know exactly how to behave as boxers. You know, that's why they call it the noble art. And it is noble. It takes a lot for somebody, no matter how experienced or inexperienced they are, to step into a boxing ring and face a guy there knowing, right, it's me or you tonight, you know, and knowing I could be hurt, you know, I could be damaged. It takes a lot of heart for somebody to do that. So the noble art, which is my brand, as you know, the noble art is well named because it is a noble thing to do, to step in and be a boxer.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I've done some really lovely things with my career as I'm a singer and an actor and a presenter and other things that I do, as well as being a boxing coach. But stepping into the ring was one of the days that I was the most proud of myself. That was the day that I was the most because it took so much bravery to go and do it.
Yeah.
I deeply apologize if you can hear my dog barking. I can hear him going mental outside the door. Um, I'd like to talk about your brand, the Noble Art, because you have some beautiful gloves that you have designed. Now, I I spoke to you before about this, that I never realized that there was actually mitt gloves and then gloves that you spar with and you pad work with, because
Yeah.
I had only ever experienced from the first day I went into the boxing gym, no one had ever shown me the mitt glove with the thumb. Now I've seen the smaller gloves with MMA and things like that because I've coached in mixed martial arts gyms and obviously I watched the sports. But I didn't actually realize that there's a whole history behind mitt gloves because they're not really used as much anymore, are they?
They're not. And that's a pity because, well, I don't know when the current sparring stroke competition gloves came into being. It must have been when I had my back turned. So now you've got the competition gloves, the sparring gloves, which, which have the thumb here, right? And bizarrely, it's attached to the part of the glove by a piece of elastic, tiny piece. So, in effect, put your hand in the glove, and the glove is telling you this is where you hold your hands. Number one lesson when we went into an amateur boxing club for the first time, when anybody goes, now it doesn't happen, of course, because it's all changed, is clench your fist. You clench your fist that way, wrapping the thumb right now there, and you punch with the knuckle part of the glove. You don't punch with the inside of the glove, which is what this kind of sparring gloves. That was illegal. That was called slapping.
Mm.
The referee would give you 2 or 3 warnings, and you continue to slap with the inside. then you were disqualified, or you had a point deducted. So I think I somebody sent me a boxing gloves manufacturer sent me three or four pairs. Beautiful. They look like black and gold and metallic blue. Oh, they look fantastic. And I tried them on, and it was like putting on a straight jacket. Right? There was no room for maneuver for your hand. And the other thing that got me was it's imperative you clench your fist. Right? If you have your, and I always tell kids, if you have your hand slightly open and you hit somebody, you'll hurt yourself. Right? And I couldn't get over it. So I thought, right, I used bag mitts. I chucked away those fabulous sparring gloves that they sent me, thinking, well, I can't wear these because these are just foreign to me. These are alien. And so I went back to my old bag mitts. And then I decided, well, there must be a 21st century way of doing this. So what if we made the padding on a bag mitt 8 ounces? They would still be very light. But we retained this thumb, this flexible thumb, to allow people to turn their fists like that and punch with the knuckle part. And that's what we did. And we sell in 60 countries. Now, it's sometimes difficult to get the message through. I mean, I remember once being in London last year to do a seminar at one of these private gyms. And one of the coaches said to me, can I try your bag mitts? And I said, yeah, sure. And he put them on and he still punched like that. And I said, you do realize you can't. He said, well, it's the only way I know how. So we've had this, I don't know how many generations of boxers growing up with the only way they know to punch is having this, right? And you're one of them, because nobody ever spoke about the bag mitts because they were all just kind of very little padding, but they still did the job. So if you look back at the greats, Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson, Rocky Marciano, Jersey Joe Walcott, Henry Anser, all on the bag. If you look at them on the bag, they're all wearing bag mitts because that's the way you should punch. You get sore fingers if you're punching inside the glove, and goodness knows what you do with these thumbs, but they're stuck. You're stuck with that. So if you're training and you want to know how to punch properly, wear bag mitts. And if you are, even if you're a competitive boxer, or if you're not, so I get lots of comments from people who have come into boxing or come back into boxing in middle age to use the gym to keep fit, anything from 30 to 55. Actually, I've had comments from guys in the 60s and 70s saying, I've gone back to the gym because I like what you're doing. And they can't get over the change in terms of the gloves. So that's principally where I see people buying these gloves. I don't want to spar. I don't want to have a fight. I'm not, I'm too old for that. But I want to be able to punch the bag properly. So that's what they do.
I love that, because also that's so entrepreneurial and innovative, where you've gone, I can take a piece of my history and try and reintroduce it into, because I personally haven't seen many bag mitts be sold. Like, yes, I've seen them around,
Yeah.
but I was ignorant to the education of people using bag mitts, and I've never used them. I'd never seen them in any of my gyms, any of my coaches using them. So you're taking a piece of your history and you're putting it back into the boxing world, which is magic. And obviously there's a calling for it because people are buying the bag mitts, 60,
Sure.
60
Yes.
countries. That's a lot. And I saw that lovely video of you giving Bivol a set after his fight,
Yeah.
after his win against Beterbiev, which was lovely. Also, I've seen your t-shirts, Boxers Not Influencers. Tell
Yeah.
us a bit about them.
Well, we came up with that idea because we had to, as the social media following grew, we were thinking, hang on a second, what we don't want to become is influencers on social media. We want people to remember the core of what I do, which is teaching boxing, uh, encouraging people to exercise and keep fit, and to all ages. So let's not be it was Paul, my son, who said, "Let's not become a Jake Paul." And then he came up with with a tagline which we have on the back of some of the T-shirts, which is "Boxer, not influencer." And so we want the people to remember that the boxer is more important if you are a proper boxer than an influencer. So even though I have coming up for 1 million followers across all the platforms, I don't see myself as an influencer, although clearly I do, judging by the comments. And the other one we had was because Sugar Ray Robinson is my favorite of all time, and I trained with him in 1964. We've got one on the back. The words say, "In a world of Jake Pauls, be a Sugar Ray." And that's a lovely message, I think. Now, nothing. I'm not having a go at Jake Paul. That's what he does, and good luck to him because he's got this kind of entrepreneurial mind which makes him squillions of dollars. So that's great. But he'll never be a boxer, despite his efforts. He'll never be at any great level. So that's how they came about, and they've captured the attention of lots of people who want them.
And it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic. I think also it's reminding the generations who are following you, because I'm assuming you've got a mixed bag of
Oh yes.
of ages that are there, that boxing is an art form that should be loved, honored, and respected. And I think in some spaces, I mean, my analogy was this, with the Jake Paul Mike Tyson situation, is like you, I've got no beef with Jake Paul. He's just a stranger stranger famous person in the world. But my observation is, let's say you've got lions who are king of the jungle. Okay, so you've got the head lion, and he's running everything. And then you've got like an old retired lion who's just chilling in the shade in the background. And then out of nowhere comes this young lion, and he goes, "I want everything that's going on here." And instead of going to the king lion, so let's say Usyk, instead of going to King Lion Usyk, he goes, "I'm going to go to the old lion under the tree over there. I'm going to
Yeah.
tell him, I'll give him a few antelope if we can have a little fight." And then he gets a few antelope and I get the kingdom. Old man lion, Tyson, is like, "Sure, dude, give me the antelope. I'm good. It doesn't affect my life neither here nor there. I get some exposure, I get some cash, sweet." Then what happens is the young lion wins, and then he walks up to King Lion Usyk and goes, "I'm the king now." And everybody in his kingdom, so the sort of the traditional boxing fans, and are looking at him going, "Sorry, what's just happened?" And he's going, "I run boxing. I'm the king. I run boxing because I beat the old king." And everyone's going, "Well, that's not how it works here. We don't navigate it like that. That's not how it does things. You have to kind of go through the ranks. You have to earn your place to be the king."
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I am aware, kind of like the whole to sell a fight situation, that Jake Paul says things to get reactions to do the thing. But my issue with that is that it's, if you want to look at it from a psychological standpoint, which I always do, is that his deep rooted insecurity means he says a lot, but he doesn't do a lot. So he talks a good game, but he can't show up with the evidence because I would respect him wholeheartedly if he could step into the ring with some of the kings in the divisions of, professional boxing, and could go toe to toe. And I don't, no disrespect to Tommy Fury, but I don't count him
Yeah.
in that arena. So, and obviously he lost to Tommy Fury, and I still don't even count Tommy Fury as part of that arena. If he could come in, he would gain all his flowers, because I could see that is somebody who takes the boxing very seriously and is willing to die on his sword, but also take the L's. And I don't think Jake Paul has the sense of self enough. And I don't think he's secure enough within himself to take L's like that. So that's kind of my observation of that world. However, I do think that he has seen a gap in the market with women's boxing, because he's now started to sign some pretty big names
Yes.
to his promoting company.
Mhm.
That I'm not against, because it means that women are getting paid what they should be paid. I mean, Serrano and Taylor got the biggest payday of their lives.
Yeah.
And they're about to have their trilogy. So this is going to make them more money than they ever need. And also, they were great fights, cracking fights, both of them. Um, I'm a fan of both. Big fan of Katie Taylor. I'm an Irish girl, so I can't help love her. But they've just also signed Ellie Scotney, who's an amazing British fighter from, and I think she's going to do some absolutely outstanding things, especially with the platform she's been given. So I'm not mad at him for that. But coming back to your whole point is that you can't rush the game of boxing. You can't influence yourself through the game. You got to kind of body it a little bit, and understand the highs, the lows, the ins and outs, the hurts, through the whole thing, which is definitely what you promote through your storytelling on your social media. And I think that's why people have fallen in love with it, because there aren't as many, and it's wise as well. You've got wisdom, you've got years behind you, you've got experience, and it's really magical. What would
Like the
you
old lion.
like? Yeah, you're the old lion, but you've come back around. You're not sitting under the tree, just waiting for the antelope. You're like, do you know what? I'm not sitting. I'm going to get back involved, and it's worked brilliantly. People really love what you have to say. I mean, I love speaking with you because I learn so much. Or
Thank you.
it's either that I learn, on the one ilk I learn so much, and the other ilk I feel like I think I'm quite an old soul, and I think I'm quite generally. So I feel like what you speak about makes sense to me, and I love that for my observations of my own career and the way that I look at boxing. I think also I love the fact that age is irrelevant in the sport because we make sense to each other because we both love this thing, and so you suddenly have a
Yes.
connection with people, and that's something I love about boxing and the world. What would you like to see in the next few years? Obviously, like you say, we've been massive jumps and leaps and changes and evolution, especially with Turkey coming in and all of this. What would you like to see for boxing over the next few years, whether that's um, amateurs, whether that's pros, whether that's for women, whether that's competitively, whether that's financially? What do you think you would like to see for the sports?
Well, if we're talking about the amateurs, I like what's happening both in Scotland and in England and in Wales, which is clubs who have been expressing disquiet for years over the ruling bodies within those particular countries have broken away and formed what they call an alliance. So you have the England Boxing Alliance, England, and similarly with Scotland and Wales. Now, they've been they've been disappointed, which is putting it mildly, with the way amateur boxing has been run because they feel, and I know this from my own experience from a few years ago coaching at another club where young boys were training, 4 nights a week. It's coming a Sunday morning for sparring, and they weren't getting any contests
Mm.
because nobody was putting on shows. You got the national championships, but if you weren't at that level, you weren't getting any fights. So no fights, no experience, no learning, and so these clubs who were expressing disquiet were saying, "Well, it's time that we broke away from." There's all sorts of issues about where the money was being spent in these organizations and so on. And so I think that's been a great move because they have come out and said, listen, what's all the big deal about spending money on elite boxers in the amateur game to try and be Olympic champions? Where are these Olympic champions going to come from? I think we're so far behind in that respect in terms of our organization at national level and in the fact that who cares? Let's have boxers boxing, and if they're going to be at a high level, then they will soon discover the pathway that they can take. But if they're not boxing regularly, and when I say regularly, they should be boxing every month at least once. Um, they'll never gain the experience that they need to go to a higher level. And this is what the alliances have done. They're staging, and now they're beginning to stage their first international events. Right, they've only been on the go for about a year, and Scotland are going to face England, for example, at the end of May, and that's a major breakthrough. Because we used to have Scotland versus any country that cared to come and box against us. We go down to the Royal Albert Hall every second year, and they would come up, the England team. And so you had this kind of regular thing of being an international boxer, which disappeared overnight. Why? because their elite boxers were being cosseted and they were taken away from their clubs and from their coaches. And that was a bad thing, I think. And they were put into their special training camp in Sheffield, and they were different from the others. Right? I don't like that. When I was younger, I'm boxing alongside um, top champions in the amateurs. Even Dick McTaggart, who was an Olympic gold medalist in 1956 from my time. We never thought we were. No, we were in awe of the fact that he won the gold medal, and he went on to have 600, or he had in his career 634 contests and 24 defeats. Phenomenal. This guy was an icon, but he wasn't an icon in our gym because he was just one of the guys. So that's the ethos that I grew up with, and I would like to see retained. And this is what's happening. Let's forget about elite boxers, and if you're a teacher, coach, a trainer, call it what you will, and you've had a kid, say, from the age of 11, and when he reaches 18, and a national coach comes along and says, we'll have him for the elite squad, two things happen. You're taking away this guy from his mentor of the past several years. You're removing that boxer from his natural environment, and he's not allowed to go and train in his own boxing club. What does that say about the ruling body if they do that? So I would like to see what's happening now in the amateurs in terms of the development of young boxers through the alliances. And and I think what we're going to get, because your career never lasts forever, especially if you're an amateur, you're not going to go on and on and on. One or two might turn professional, but that's irrelevant. What you want is a guy who's come out the other end and said, I was an amateur boxer. I won a district title or a regional title. I won a Scottish championship or the championship of England for the alliance. Who cares if it's for the alliance or for the other governing body, England boxing or so on? Who cares? This is what you're doing. You're giving boys and girls an opportunity to box. And if you can say at the end of a year, end of a season, oh, I had 5 contests or 6 contests, then that's probably 5 or 6 more than you would otherwise. Too much kind of non-boxing going on. It's all in the gyms. Get it out in the open. As for the professionals, Rachel, I like the way it's going. I like the fact that Dana White from UFC has joined up with Turki Al Sheikh and is taking over professional boxing, the big promotions and the big fights. And the thing I like about it most is that I hope they will cut down on the number of weight divisions. I think there are far too many. We've got super this, super that, cruiserweight, all these kind of things have been invented in the past few years and decades. I'd like to see them cut it back. But more importantly, what we need is one champion for every weight division. We don't need a WBA, WBO, IBF. Who's the world champion? I am. No, you're not. He is. Because he's WBA. Yeah, but I'm WBO. Oh, but I'm IBF and WBC. So you get rid of all of that. What you do is you bring boxing together and say there'll be rankings like there used to be, and you will box the top ranking. If you're the champion, you contenders that we tell you should box. That's how I see boxing evolving, going back to the future.
No, I think they're both really good observations and really good points, because I think you don't get an experience or a taste of boxing unless you box. So if you want to be a boxer and you don't get to box, you don't feel like a
Yeah,
boxer. I know that I'd really battled with that, not being allowed to box medically. I really
yeah,
struggled because I was like, I could be technically sound and I could be a good, but I could only, I had to be very cautious, and nobody really wanted to spar me that hard because I'm the girl with the dodgy heart. So nobody wanted to put me in a hospital. And it wasn't until I sort of took it into my own hands that I get to really feel like I was, I felt like the boxer, and then I fought. So I felt like, okay, I've gone through the motions. And actually
sure.
it teaches so much of that mental process, which I think is so important for people
Yeah.
in this sport. It's just like if you learn how to manage your mind, you learn how to manage your breath, you learn how to stay calm, like you mentioned earlier. And it's hard
Yeah.
to do that if you're doing it once a year. You know, it's a lot harder because there's so much more build up on this fight. It matters so much more. And actually, if you've got those, you know, those bouts under your belt, if you do decide to go pro,
Yeah.
you've already got loads and loads and loads of ring experience. Yes, it's a different ball game, but you've already got that ring
Yeah.
experience. And if you never decide, but you
Yeah.
just feel like when you're ready to come out of the sport, you're like, I did that properly. You know, I did that well. I did
Yes.
that. I gained so much experience and so much knowledge. Because it's a funny old world, boxing, because, you know, a lot of these, it's not quite the same in other sports. You know, you could have a whole amateur career that goes into a certain point, and you just, you know, you never get paid a penny, and then you just carry on your normal life. And it means so much more to people than just being the winner. You know, it's a life choice. It's therapy. It's a mindset. It's so much more than that. And I think that's why I'm so in love with it myself. You know, I think it's such a special thing.
Yeah.
um Frank, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I just love talking to you. It's just such a joy, and you have so much knowledge and so much understanding from years and years and years of experience of being in, being out, being in the sports world, and then coming back in again. I just want to thank you so much for your time, because, you know, time is very precious, and we are not infinite in how much we have. So thank you for giving yours to me, and I'm really hoping that I'll get to see you on the circuit, get to see you in person, hopefully in one of the fights coming up. And yeah, good luck with it all. It's just wonderful. It's just absolutely wonderful, brilliant, and just keep doing what you're doing, because you're inspiring so many people, every age group, and you're definitely inspiring me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. It was lovely to talk with you. And you clearly know what you're talking about, and that's what I like.
Thank you.
Well done.
That means a lot. Thank you. I've studied hard for this game, so it means a lot. Thank you. Look, have a fabulous rest of your day, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.